What's up? My name is Sebastian Lopez. This is my buddy Reid, and this is how we made Dark King by A Boogie.
Listen, I don't wanna hurt anybody. My bitch is a brat, had to work in the body. I don't need a bodyguard, only got bodyguards with me, cause I don't want broke catching bodies. I'm in the A and I still got the pocket rocket on me. Niggas be slow with the top. If no got it on him, you know he gon' pop it. Dubai got it on him, you know he gon' pop it. And biceps, explosives.
So a little bit of a backstory about how all of this kind of happened. So Reid and I started speaking around June of last year. We met each other through some mutuals online, and basically just started sending samples to one another, just going back and forth for a couple months. And then around September, late September-ish, he had posted a story saying that he needed loops for A Boogie. 5 days later, we get a text saying we got the song. Now that we've got the backstory out of the way, let's go ahead and break down the beat. Now, Reid and I both agreed that we wanted to make this as informative as possible for y'all, so this might take a little bit longer than most other breakdown videos, but we hope that y'all enjoy the process as much as we did. Alright, let's start off by breaking down the sample. This is the full project for the sample. We'll kind of start off with what I did at the beginning. So let's get a little bit of a backstory to this sample as well. I was making this at around like 2 or 3 in the morning with some of my best friends on Discord, and basically I just wanted to make a really bad loop and turn that into something that was usable. So this was the loop that I came up with initially. So I just fully recall my friends joining my screen on Discord and then clicking off pretty much within the first 2 to 3 seconds. So I think that confirmed that I made a really bad loop at that point. Now that I had that out of the way, I wanted to go ahead and flip it. So the first thing I did is that I grabbed the sample and then I stretched it by 2. And I got something like this. When I'm flipping samples, the first thing I'll do is slow it down, and then right after that I'll reverse it, and that's exactly what I did here. So I go ahead and reverse it, and it comes out to this. At this point, I'm extremely happy with how that sounds, but I do feel like it could be a little bit cooler, so I went ahead and kept it that way for the middle part, but I wanted to make an even better intro. So what I ended up doing is that I brought it to the front, pitched it up 12 semitones, and then afterwards I added a reverse reverb and a regular reverb, so it would sound like this. Now that I had that really spacey vibe at the beginning, I really just wanted to accentuate it a little bit. So I went ahead and brought up this instrument called Erratic Motion on Logic and played out this on my keyboard. Then we go back to flipping the sample again. So I bounced that out, and then I go ahead and pitched it down and stretched it. And this is what I got. At this point, I think I have a really interesting intro, and now it's just time for me to move on to the bass. Now, what I mean by the bass of the sample, I mean the section that is going to be used for the majority of the sample, right? So I like this idea of making it weird at the beginning and then making it a little bit more simple when it actually hits. That way that the artist has their space to do what they need to do. The first thing I add in order to do this is a bass. So it's very simple. This is the bass line. After that, I really just wanted to add some ear candy, so I went ahead and added this viola tremolo that I found. Basically, I cut off the highs and the lows and just put a little bit of reverb, and it sounded like this. Something extremely simple, and then here's the second note. Basically something super simple in the background that sometimes you wouldn't even think makes much of a difference, but it kind of does, just to bring a little bit of a different value to the actual sample itself. So now I would say this is probably the most important part of the sample. Basically this just meshes everything together, and it was the last thing that I put. I went ahead and just played some guitar, and this is what it sounded like. So I try to keep it as simple as possible, basically everything matching up with one another, giving the artist their space. And then I guess I'll go into a little bit of detail for this part. I don't think it was used, but we can look at it anyways. This is basically a little string section that I did make at the end of the loop just in case, kind of like an outro. This is what it sounds like. That's pretty much the entirety of the loop. After that, in terms of the mix, I'm very big on EQing and doing things on the way. After that, I guess I have kind of like this master chain that I put on top of it. Sometimes I'll do some additional EQing. In this case, I only did subtractive EQing, so this is just some subtractive EQing in certain parts of the sample. Next, we have this Pro Q3 subtle stereo enhancer. I like to add this on every sample that I make. Basically just enhances the very low and the very high part of your EQ spectrum. Then we have the Logic stock spread. This basically just allows me to make sure that the high end of our frequencies are spreading out more throughout the mix, and then it also allows the low end to somewhat spread but not as much as the high end. And then Ozone, which basically is known as a mastering tool, but I use it in a different way. So practically what I would like to do is just make sure that I have some additional subtractive EQ in certain sections. Then I use the imager that they provide, which just provides for a much wider sound that you normally are used to. And then last but not least, I have this limiter. So limiter kind of depends on what the actual sample is sounding like in the moment, but I usually like to add more sustain than transient, and then I usually have a pretty high amount on the transient emphasis. This is all just personal preference, but I always recommend that everyone tries out their own settings so they can find their own sound. So now that we've gone over all the individual pieces of the loop, let's see what it all sounds like together. Pretty much does it. That's the loop from my end. Now I'll go ahead and pass it on to Reid so he can show y'all how he did the drums.
Yo, what's good, y'all? It's Reid, and this is how I made the drums for Dark King by Boogie Wit Da Hoodie. So right when I got the sample from my boy Sebastian, I knew this was totally different. Once I heard the intro, I knew I had to use this loop. So the first thing I did when it comes to the drums is lay down the rim. And then I moved on to the hi-hats. And the hi-hats I wanted to keep pretty simple, but just create a little bit of bounce with the velocities and all the rules and stuff. And once I had the rim and the hi-hat, I went ahead and laid down the 808. So the next thing I usually like to add is a little bit of percussion to give the listener a little bit of ear candy, something to listen out for. Then I added a counter snare. After that, I laid down the open hats. And those follow the 808 pattern pretty closely. So something that I find is pretty unique to my production style is creating different patterns and arrangements so that the listener really has something to look forward to, and the beat switches in some scenarios. That's one of the main reasons I love this loop, is because when I heard the intro, it was so different than the main component of the guitar that I knew it just fit with my style perfectly. Speaking of the intro, I'll go through that right now. What I have is a little love filter on the intro here and percussion loop, and I'll play the whole intro, let y'all hear what that sounds like. Then in this highlighted section, I took out a bit of the drums, took out some of the ear candy and little like percussion accents, and kept it more simple. I also added some melody components, so you're taking out a little bit of the drums, but putting a little bit more melody, so you get kind of like a different feeling, I guess. In this third highlighted section, I took a lot of the drums out, mainly the 808, and added the perc loop back in from the start. I also added the intro loop, so it gives it a little bit more of a different feel and a little bit of a slower kind of breakdown type feel. And the main focus for this section was to create a really spacey kind of ambient type feel. And one of the ways that I did that was with a lot of reverb and delays. So on one of the hi-hats, I have some reverb. On the rim, I obviously have some reverb, as you heard in the first part. And on the perc loop as well, you have some reverb and delay. This is how the breakdown section sounds. And after that, the rest of the beat is pretty simple. I copied over the hook and changed up the verse a little bit, but nothing too crazy. Other than that, it was really just about mixing the beat, making sure all the levels were correct, and throwing my personal master preset on it. Everything said and done, this beat is not super complex. There's a few moving parts and some stuff hopefully you could take away from it. I think this goes to show that even something as simple as a Spanish guitar beat, if each person is putting their unique spin on it and making it their own, it could turn into something really crazy. I appreciate y'all watching the video, and make sure to subscribe to Sebas down below.
And there you go. That's how we produced Dark King by A Boogie with the Hoodie. I'd like to give a big shout out to both Yachty and Noon for this opportunity, and of course Reid for putting me in the position to get a song with someone like A Boogie. I hope to make more videos like this in the future, and hope to see y'all soon. Have a good one.